Your choice to lease or buy a car isn't about the monthly payment. It comes from a hidden capital depreciation curve that drains $4,200 from your net worth annually. Dealerships structure both contracts around one specific retention variable. They rely on your focus remaining fixed on 30-day cash flow increments. By the end of this video, you will see the exact mathematical threshold. You will know exactly when a lease becomes a forced wealth transfer. You will learn how to structure your next vehicle acquisition based on total ownership costs. You will keep capital on your balance sheet. Let me be clear about what this is and what it isn't. This isn't about monthly payment comparisons. This is about total capital depletion over 72 months. Those are not the same thing. When you walk into a dealership, the finance manager focuses your attention on a 30-day window. They show you a $450 lease payment next to a $680 loan payment. They frame the $230 difference as monthly savings. That is an intentional misdirection. The auto industry spends $14.6 billion annually on marketing to keep you focused on that specific cash flow delta. We are going to look past the monthly payment. We will examine the exact math of asset depreciation, equity retention, and capital opportunity cost. You will see how a $35,000 vehicle consumes $47,200 of your wealth over 6 years if you buy. You will see it drain $28,800 every 3 years if you lease. We will strip away the financing illusions. We will calculate the absolute 0 point of automotive expense. This requires looking at the transaction from the balance sheet down, not the checking account up. Let's build this from the ground up because every part that follows depends on it. A vehicle is not an investment. It is a depreciating utility asset. Think of a new car like a block of ice placed on hot summer asphalt. Every single minute, a precise, measurable amount of your liquid net worth melts away. Whether you lease or buy, you are simply negotiating how to pay for the puddle. To understand the math, we must define the capital depreciation curve. This is the mathematical rate at which a physical machine loses its resale value in the open market. Look at a standard $35,000 vehicle. When you buy it, you acquire the entire block of ice. You absorb 100% of the decay. When you lease it, you do not rent the car. You finance the exact portion of the ice that the dealer calculates will melt over 36 months. They lock this decay rate into a metric called the residual value. Residual value is the exact wholesale price the bank assigns to your car on day 1095 of the contract. If the bank assigns a 55% residual to a $35,000 car, they expect the machine to be worth $19,250 in 3 years. That leaves $15,750. That is the melting ice. Here is the one rule that governs everything in automotive finance. You always pay for the decay, and the bank always charges you interest on the capital they deploy to cover it. Let's run the math on the 72-month cycle. If you buy, you finance the full $35,000. At a 7% interest rate over 72 months, you pay $42,945 in total cash. At month 72, the residual market value is $9,800. Subtract that remaining equity from your total cash paid. The real capital consumed is $33,145. If you lease, you finance only the $15,750 decay. The dealer applies a rent charge called a money factor. This is an interest rate hidden in a decimal. Multiply a 0.0029 money factor by 2,400. That equals exactly 6.96% APR. Over 36 months, you pay $18,400 to cover the decay and the rent charge. At month 36, you hand the keys back. You retain $0 in equity. You must repeat this cycle twice to match the 72-month timeline. Your total capital consumed is $36,800. And there is one more date worth marking. At month 73, the buyer stops paying interest entirely. The lessee starts cycle 3. We will come back to why that matters because it changes the whole picture once you see it. Mechanism 1 is the opportunity cost of unrecoverable expenses. Capital deployed into depreciating steel cannot simultaneously earn equity premiums in the market. Every dollar you hand to the captive finance company is a dollar that stops working for your balance sheet forever. Run the one number. You start with $35,000. The rate is 8%. Over 6 years, that compounds to $55,540. Now subtract $33,145 in depreciation and loan interest. The real number you keep is $22,395. This opportunity cost remains completely invisible to the consumer because dealerships only quote the capital you spend on the car, never the yield you forfeit. By ignoring the lost yield, you misprice the true baseline expense of basic transportation ownership. Mechanism 2 is phantom appreciation. Buyers often celebrate trade-in values remaining elevated during supply shortages, mistaking nominal price retention for actual wealth creation. The dealer tells you the car held its value, making you feel victorious. Run the one number. You start with $19,250. The rate is 3%. Over 3 years, that compounds to $21,045. Now subtract $3,590 in purchasing power erosion. The real number you keep is $17,455. This illusion persists because the average buyer looks at the gross trade-in check without discounting for the heavily inflated cost of their next replacement vehicle. They trade a depreciated asset for an inflated one. The nominal equity jump merely masks a deeper structural purchasing power deficit. Mechanism 3 is the leverage trap. Financing an asset that mathematically decays means you pay a premium to accelerate your net worth reduction. A car loan is not a mortgage. It does not amplify gains. It strictly amplifies guaranteed losses. Run the one number. You start with $35,000. The rate is 7%. Over 6 years, that compounds to $42,945. Now subtract $33,145 in depreciation and capitalized interest. The real number you keep is $9,800. This reality stays hidden from consumers because finance managers frame the long-term loan strictly as a tool for monthly affordability. They isolate the 30-day cash flow metric. They intentionally detach your focus from the underlying vehicle's permanent downward trajectory. Mechanism 4 is the liquidity illusion. Cars appear incredibly easy to sell, but converting metal back to cash requires absorbing severe transactional friction. The market is not frictionless. The dealer takes a heavy cut just to process the metal. Run the one number. You start with $15,000. The rate is 15%. Over 3 years, that compounds to $22,813. Now subtract $10,513 in dealer margins and wholesale friction. The real number you keep is $12,300. This friction operates invisibly because consumers confuse retail Blue Book estimates with actual wholesale clearing prices. Dealerships exploit this knowledge gap perfectly. They capture the spread between what you think the machine is worth and what cash they will actually hand you. Mechanism 5 is the dividend reinvestment void. Productive assets generate cash that buys more assets automatically, whereas vehicles require continuous capital injections just to maintain baseline functionality. A car is an active liability. It constantly demands fresh liquidity. Run the one number. You start with $35,000. The rate is 4%. Over 6 years, that compounds to $44,286. Now subtract $18,000 in cumulative maintenance and insurance premiums. The real number you keep is $26,286. This specific deficit goes entirely unnoticed because vehicle buyers psychologically compartmentalize repairs and insurance as separate monthly living expenses. They fail to underwrite the aggressive, ongoing capital injections required to simply keep the decaying asset street legal and operational for a decade. If you believe this math is purely theoretical, the macroeconomic data tells a ruthless story. We can track exactly how the automotive finance sector engineered a permanent wealth transfer over the last 4 decades by altering historical norms. Let's look at the timeline of the leverage trap. In the 1990s, the standard auto loan was 36 months. By 2010, the 60-month loan became standard. Today, 72-month and 84-month terms dominate the dealership floor. This shift was not driven by consumer demand for longer debt. It was driven by a mathematical fracture. As the capital cost of vehicles aggressively outpaced median wage growth, the underlying asset became too expensive to fit into the consumer's 30-day cash flow window. The math broke. To hide the fracture, the industry simply stretched the timeline. They weaponized time to keep the monthly payment flat, while the total capital extracted from your net worth doubled. Then came the 2020 to 2022 supply chain shock. This created the greatest anomaly in modern automotive history. Depreciating steel temporarily appreciated. Finance managers still use the ghost of this era in their pitches today. They sell the illusion that modern cars hold their value uniquely well, but a century of economic data proves this was a once-in-a-lifetime statistical aberration. The depreciation curve has violently reverted to the mean. Wholesale values are dropping back to historical norms. The ice is melting faster than ever. Let's look at a 12-year historical cohort comparing the two paths in real market conditions. The perpetual lessee. From 2012 to 2024, a consumer signs 4 consecutive 36-month leases on a standard $35,000 equivalent vehicle. They capture zero equity, absorb 4 separate acquisition fees, 4 separate disposition fees, and constantly finance the steepest, most punishing part of the depreciation curve, years 1 through 3. Total capital permanently extracted, roughly $76,000. End equity, $0. The buy and hold operator. In 2012, a consumer buys a $35,000 vehicle, pays it off over 60 months, and operates it for 12 years. They absorb the initial steep depreciation, but then they ride the flat tail of that curve for 7 years with zero underlying capital cost. They redirect their former payment into a yielding asset. Total capital extracted for the car, including the heavier late-stage maintenance load, roughly $55,000. Net wealth impact. Positive. Due to the massive dividend reinvestment void being filled during the 7 years of no payments. History proves the baseline reality. The automotive industry relies heavily on consumer amnesia. They need you to forget that a car is a 12-year asset, and they need you to treat it like a 3-year subscription. Let me be straight with you. The 12-year buy and hold strategy is not for you. Not today. You need an established liquid cash buffer of $8,500 first. That capital absorbs the inevitable mechanical failures during years 8 through 12 without forcing you into 24% revolving debt. If you operate without that specific buffer, holding an aging physical asset becomes mathematically dangerous. But I needed you to see the baseline math of asset retention anyway. I needed you to realize that walking away from $22,395 in retained equity every cycle guarantees a permanent drag on your personal balance sheet. There are 2 loud options and a third quieter one. The first loud option is the perpetual lease cycle. You fear being trapped with an aging, depreciating machine. You sign consecutive 36-month contracts to guarantee a warranty and avoid repair bills entirely. The math fails instantly. You start with $40,000, the rate is 7%. Over 9 years, that compounds to $73,500. Now subtract $54,000 in pure lease payments. The real number you keep is $19,500. You pay a severe premium strictly to maintain the illusion of automotive security and convenience. The second loud option is the hyper-depreciated cash car. You overcorrect and buy a 15-year-old vehicle for $4,000 cash. You think avoiding bank debt entirely makes you financially invincible. The math fails through heavy operational friction. You start with $4,000. The rate is 5%. Over 3 years, that compounds to $4,630. Now subtract $8,500 in mechanical repairs. The real number you keep is negative $3,870. You traded a predictable interest rate for an unpredictable mechanical failure rate. That failure rate drains your liquidity faster than any standard auto loan. The third quieter option is the 48-month offset strategy. You buy a 4-year-old vehicle where 45% of the depreciation curve already melted away. You finance it for exactly 36 months, then hold it for 48 more. You start with $22,000. The rate is 6%. Over 7 years, that compounds to $33,080. Now subtract $11,200 in combined depreciation and maintenance. The real number you keep is $21,880. You capture the flat tail of the decay curve while avoiding the steep initial drop. This strategy costs nothing but time. The single most important thing in this video wasn't the $22,395 in retained automotive equity. It was the habit of underwriting total capital decay. That works on any physical asset, not just a car. Most people measure their financial lives in 30-day increments. They track checking account inflows against monthly outflows. They completely ignore the underlying balance sheet. But wealth is strictly a balance sheet game. The dealership knows this. The captive finance company knows this. They exploit your cash flow focus to quietly extract your net worth. You stop this wealth transfer by shifting your time horizon. You stop looking at the monthly payment entirely. You start calculating the exact cost of capital over a 72-month cycle. When you force every transaction through that specific lens, the math breaks the marketing. You see the mechanics of depreciation clearly. You protect your capital from unnecessary erosion. This shift in perspective alters your entire financial trajectory. It changes how you evaluate a $1,200 phone upgrade. It changes how you underwrite a $450,000 mortgage. You stop paying a 7% premium for temporary convenience. You start playing the exact same mathematical game the institutions play. That's what we built for our members. Inside the vault, there is a 72-month capital decay calculator that models specific depreciation curves for 400 different vehicle platforms. The link is in the description below. But whether you ever touch the vault or not, take the habit with you. Never measure your net worth in 30-day increments again.